Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, Channel 141, and all of our social media platforms. I'm Harold Fisher. The title of our program tonight is Young, Gifted, and Frisked. It's an examination of what appears to be a resurgence of police stop and frisk policies across the nation. This was last part of a national conversation when former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg ran for president. But now the issue is back in the form of uncomfortable interaction with police and young black men and teenagers. And just last week, the DC ACLU released a report saying stop and frisk tactics used by the Metropolitan Police Department are racially biased. More than 70% of stops made by DC police between July and December of last year were of black people. But African Americans make up only 47% of the population. Well, tonight, my guests are Dr. Robert Wingfield, Chief Psychologist and Clinic Director for Boys Town, Washington, D.C., Kishelle Coleman, Executive Director for Boys Town in Washington, D.C., Joala Lloyd, he's a 25-year-old security guard who has had run-ins with D.C. police, and Ayize Sabater, a 24-year-old student at Morgan State University. You can certainly tweet us using the hashtag WHUR-FM. Thank you all for joining this important conversation. I appreciate it. Ayize, I want to start with you. Talk to me briefly about your encounter with police.
All right. Well, I've had a few different encounters with police, some good, some not so good. And I guess one that's really or two that's in the forefront of my mind was one when I was really younger. Somebody had broke into my father's car, and when we came back, we were trying to figure out what was taken from the car and things of that nature. And some police, I guess, had stopped by. I guess somebody called the police thinking that we were the ones stealing from the car. And when they came, like, they almost pulled a gun on my brother. My dad was like it was a whole long process just in trying to explain, this was our car. Somebody had broken in, and so on. And then a second one that's like on the forefront of my mind was maybe a few years ago when actually it was in Baltimore County, like Towson area. And I was actually at a graduation party at Towson, and apparently a fight had broken out across the street at a predominantly white area. And when the party that I was at let out, I guess some type of altercation happened, and like in a matter of minutes, police were all over the place, pepper spraying people, had the canines out. My friend got assaulted, and when that happened, like I tried to step in, and then and I got taken down too. So it's been some good, again, like I said, and some not so good. So those are just a few experiences I've had.
You have some interesting thoughts about why young black men are having difficulty with police, considering our climate, particularly as it relates to trust. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I feel like with a lot of human interactions, it goes both ways. So for on the police side of things, a lot of times, they come with a preconceived idea that they may be conscious of or subconsciously, and that kind of drives the interaction a certain way. And then on the civilian side, being a black man, you know, um, dealing with that can definitely be infuriating. So it's just learning how to try and manage your stress, and control, and having a certain level of self-control, because it definitely is like really annoying and just frustrating to be stopped, and for very very minuscule reasons, or very things that are not even that much of an issue. And so I feel like if both sides could learn how to try and manage or navigate through those emotions, I feel like it could drive to more positive experiences.
Juwalo, you also had a rather fascinating uh, interaction with police on U Street a while back. Talk to me about that.
So this indication on U Street was one that I questioned for a long time because it was a fight that had broke out on U Street, 14th and U, and I'm also an entertainer, so I'm around all of that at the same time. So going back to my vehicle, I was stopped by a police officer, a Caucasian police officer, and he was asking me questions that I didn't have answers for. So
Like what?
he took my answers as and he took my non-answering as being disrespectful, and decided he thought he was going to put his hands on me. And I feel like, what are you putting your hands on me for? So I'm asking him questions, but also resisting, not pushing, just resisting. Then two other officers came. They don't know what's going on. They just feel like they should come and attack me. I'm standing my ground, not pushing, just resisting. What's the problem, officer? Oh, you have a problem with this officer. Now you have a problem with me. They don't even know what's going on. At the end of it, they told me that they were looking for somebody who had gotten into a fight. Is a black guy walking down the street with a tank top on. Mind you, it's hot outside. It's summertime. I'm chilling. I'm walking to my car. My shirt is literally in my hand. I'm walking to my car, and I think that night I went to jail for like 2 nights, and I wasn't processed until 24 hours, and I just got sent home with no charges.
What do you think about that?
Confused, very confused of why it happens. I don't know. It also goes back to how the police system was created in the first place. And the things that they're doing is not even really confusing. It's just they're trying to tell us lies that we already know. And they're trying to cover it up by, oh, we're here for the people. But you're not, though. You know what you became a police officer for. And it's really confusing for the little kids that's growing up seeing police officers. Because now we're not even going to respect the people who are in our own skin defending our city. And now we're attacking people who are pure and not even attacking the people who are not. We just have to, it's a lot that goes into this. It's not even the police system. It's the government. It's the congressional system. I think that's what it's called. It's what we do behind closed doors that affect what we see in the open. And that's just my take on it. I'll be going a lot of places, but I'm confused. But not really, because I know, but I don't.
That's really fascinating, and I would even say profound, where there's this jumble of emotion in your head, and I'm sure that this is not unique. Dr. Wingfield, talk to me about what you're hearing from Juwalo after undergoing this incident with police. Obviously, he wasn't physically hurt, but there is still trauma involved with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, I applaud both young men for being willing and courageous enough to express their stories. This is one of the reasons why I agreed to be on this segment, because I know that these things happen and more light needs to be shed on this topic. And these young men represent stories that can go back many, many decades, and it continues in 2020. And the stress that's related to having these interactions with police really accumulate over time to make us physically sick. The body is not designed to operate within chronic distress. Acute distress can be fine. In fact, acute distress can be helpful, but when it's long term, the end result is the body eventually turning on itself. The immune system is affected, and we as Black men have to think about so many things before we even step out of the house. And so, what these young men are describing really has an effect on how they can concentrate, maybe at work, maybe to prepare for a test. They are dealing with additional burdens that other groups of people don't have to deal with. Even to go on a job interview, you can't just map quest destination B, start point A, destination B, 30 minutes. Okay, I'm going to leave out an hour early so I can get to 30 minutes early. You actually have to estimate time for DWB, a driving while black, because there's a higher probability that somebody is going to assume, a police officer is going to assume that because you are a black male, you are a criminal, and it's up to the black male to prove that he's not a criminal. I got my license in 1998. I really didn't understand why there was such concern about prejudice and discrimination until I got my driver's license. And that's when a whole series of driving while blacks occurred at 16 years old, even to now. And you have to present yourself in a way to prove that you're not a criminal. That is wrong. And it's filled with all the things that we know from social psychology, such as confirmation bias, stereotypes, assumptions that are then not challenged with the reality that most of us are good people, good citizens. We actually give back to our communities, and we want the same kind of treatment. It is not a inconvenience for others. It should not be an inconvenience for others to treat us in an equitable fashion.
Ms. Coleman, one of the overarching issues that Dr. Wingfield has mentioned and that the two young men have discussed uh, have to do with interaction with police. And at Boys Town, when you're talking about kind of providing services, social skills, and the like, talk to me a little bit about some of the stopgap measures that you do there for helping young men with the talk, as we say, how to deal with police. Certainly fathers, yes, and even mothers have had that conversation with their children, but not all children have the benefit of that. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And, just based on the things that I've just heard from the two young men, one saying having to be able to manage their emotions when dealing, facing the cops and, asking questions and standing your ground. So for me, my perspective as a mother and as an administrator from a youth care organization, the main word that comes to my mind is preparation. We have to prepare our young black men for what they're going out into this world. So within our program, we do teach social skills, and we try to get them to generalize those skills so that when they leave our campus day to day and when they leave our program. And so when it comes to the talk, while I understand when they're in those situations, it's not right. We know it's not right. However, we also know it's our reality. And so it's my goal to make sure that we are preparing them. And so it becomes part of a skill we have to teach them, and how to interact with the police and how to get back home alive. That is the most important thing. When you're in that moment, it's not right, but you can't control what they're doing. And so we want to prepare young men to just be in control of their own self and their own emotions. And so we get very specific in terms of what does that look like. Are you going to ask questions and talk at that moment? No. Where are your hands going to be? Where are your eyes going to be focused on? And yes, we want you to stand your ground, but we want you to make it home alive. And then when you get back, we can talk about those experiences. We can help you to problem solve, and better yet, we can focus on skills that's going to help you learn how to advocate for yourself in an environment and in a way that we hope that will affect change. And so I think today, in the wake of George Floyd's death, even as an administrator, I'm thinking, what are we forgetting? What else do we need to talk about? What other skills do we need to teach? And so in our program, it's important, and we mandate that they have family meetings daily. And I encourage this in our own homes now. We've got to get back to that sense of community. We got to get back to that sense of family. And we can't be afraid to have these tough conversations with our kids. We've got to talk about racism. We've got to talk about violence. We've got to talk about justice. And we have to prepare our kids how to deal with these things. Because even if we don't say it, they're experiencing it. These kids are coming to us. They see police snatching their moms out of their homes, snatching them out of their homes. They're being pulled over. They're seeing it in so many different ways, and they don't understand it. And we don't want them to just learn from that perspective. We want to have say so on how they understand what they're experiencing and how they can get through it.
This is a special edition of the Daily Drum, Young, Gifted, and Frisked, an examination of the resurgence of police stop and frisk policies across the nation. You're certainly invited to join this conversation on Facebook or on Instagram or on WHUR. We certainly invite you to comment, and if you post your comment, we will certainly ask the question or repeat your comment as you write it in. I want to ask Aize, how does it feel when it seems that, with all the correction that you're doing as a Black man, and not much correction is directed towards police? Why is it that, certainly you want to be on the straight and narrow, but why can't it go both ways? Did you hear the question?
I heard bits and pieces.
Yeah, I was saying. So, as Black men, we always have to make sure that we are doing, the absolute right thing, whether it's driving, walking, sleeping, breathing, eating, etc. Okay, but why not? Do you find it a difficult proposition to have police address their behavior? Were you able to hear my question? I think we may have lost his connection.
Yes.
Go right ahead. Did you hear my question? Did you hear my? Well, let me ask Juwalo. Did you hear the question? Yeah, please turn your microphone on. I think your microphone is off, Juwalo. Thank you. Please.
I did hear the question, but I might need you to ask it one more time.
Sure. Obviously, in your case, when you were having that interaction with police, you were you were walking down the street, minding your own business. You were trying to get home, okay? And yet you had a confrontation with police. And the issue, at least I would imagine for you, is not that you were doing anything wrong, but that, that the actions of the police were not correct. Do you have an issue with the fact that you have to act right, but they don't?
I have an issue with the oppressors. It's not the police system. It's the belief of the police system. It's you ask me that question because it's like 1,000 things that go. It's not nothing that I'm doing wrong. I was literally about to fix my hair before I came on here. I was like, no, I'm not about to fix my hair because this is what they have a problem with. Our beauty is what they have a problem with. So I'm not going to change what I'm doing because I'm not doing anything wrong. We have to know that it's right and wrong. There's no such thing. It's good and evil. That's where we live in right now. We are in a spiritual warfare, and it's karma coming back from everything that they have done. It's never nothing that we're doing wrong. They just trying to manipulate us, and we're not having it no more. It's the things that we have. It's nothing ever that we're doing wrong. Michael X didn't do nothing wrong. Rosa Parks didn't do nothing wrong. We're great.
Dr. Wingfield, your comment about that?
Well, he is in a way taking some of what Dr. King talked about in the letter from Birmingham City Jail when he was talking about a just law versus an unjust law. And he talked about the different levels of law. Positive law, a man created law, must be embedded within natural law. Natural law must be embedded within eternal law. Eternal law is identical to the mind of God. So when he talks about this being spiritual warfare, he's on point. This is a battle between living out what our Creator has designed us to be and to live. Life is sacred. And for the event that took place with Mr. George Floyd, we were all alarmed and very disturbed. Why? Because we know this is out of the order, the natural order, the eternal order, and even the laws say that this is wrong. Now, we must ask, why is it that we still have doubt about whether he's going to be convicted? We have doubt because of the systems. The systems have the policies, have the mechanisms that protect individuals who commit acts of violence and commit evil, racist behavior, like an inequitable police practice that is targeting a group of individuals, represents evil if the end result is death. So the systems must come into play during the conversations, because that officer has a supervisor who has a supervisor who has a supervisor. Let's ask this question. What if not only the officer who killed the black man went to prison, but his superiors and his superior? Guess what? We will see a drop in the number of black lives lost in the hands of police, because they're going to be trained differently, because now the consequences don't just fall on the people who are actively encountering the citizens, but also those superiors who are responsible for the training. So as we look at the big picture, we must put all the pieces together. And there are some good officers. I have friends who are great officers, and I know that they do everything they can do in their role, but we need to support those good officers in many ways and make sure that they are protected when they are whistleblowers, because some of them are not. Some of them whistleblow, they get transferred. They whistleblow, they get demoted. They whistleblow, now they might not be able to feed their kids. So it's a punishment for living out honesty. And we need to protect the good officers too. I rally around the good officers. I love you all. We need you all, but the community needs the service to be the priority.
Mm-hmm.
Might I add something to that?
Sure, please do.
All right, so I definitely agree with a lot of the stuff that was said, and to kind of add to the idea of reform, there's something that Fred Hampton had said about when people who were looking to join like the Black Panthers, they said that they would do a political education kind of training camp that they had people who were looking to join in a certain time. But one of the things that I took away from what he was saying was how education is probably one of the most important things in a lot of these systems. And if we can start trying to change these systems by helping to change the individuals, because once you change how they think, how they're educated, then we can really start having the system to change. And I feel like I definitely agree. Maybe having a much better educational system or program put in place for people who are becoming officers or looking to become officers, because I believe it more times than not, it's not very much requirements needed to be an officer, and it's not very much training that's going into it, whether it be like it should be psychological training that goes into it, stress training that goes into it, teaching individuals how, on that on a larger scale, making sure that those things are being implemented. Because like you said, you have I have an uncle that's an officer as well, and he's a great person, but that's because he as an individual is a good person. So I feel like once we start changing the individuals and better educating ourselves and those individuals, that we can really change those systems.
And I think what you're referring to, and we've heard this term a lot when it comes to policing, cultural competency. In other words, understanding the communities that you are serving and that you are patrolling. And as we have seen, for example, in the District of Columbia, we've also seen that, for example, in Baltimore. On my street here in Baltimore, there's a police officer who lives 2 doors up. But that is unusual because, for example, in Washington, D.C., many of the officers don't live in the district. They live out in the suburbs. Some of them are coming from communities that are not familiar with Washington, and sometimes those things may contribute to clashes. You seem as if you want to share something, Ms. Coleman, because I saw you kind of nodding your head real quick. If you have a chance to add to the conversation before I go to the break in about 5 minutes.
Yes, I think it really is about, well, a couple of comments that I wanted to say is one is about the culture in the police department, right? So it's not all police. There are some inherently good, but again, they're not going to speak up if there's repercussions on them. And so we do have to look at that culture. We also have to get back to that sense of community and have them involved in the community. Most of our young people experiences with the police is negative, and it doesn't have to be all the time. And I think, I know for me as an administrator, and I'm thinking now, what are ways we can do to bring the police on our campus, to get to know our kids, to see who they are as individuals, not the color of their skin, not their reputation that if they're in this program, they inherently are bad, but they're just kids, you know what I mean, who wants a better life. And that's why they're there. And so I think we need to, those that are in positions to have an impact, we really need to think through how do we bring that community back together and make the police department an active part of that community. At Boys Town, when our kids do something that's inappropriate, we don't call the police on them. There are a lot of areas or programs or scenarios where if a kid does wrong, the police gets called. And so police are seen as an intervention for kids when they're doing wrong. Well, police were designed to, or they're said to protect and serve. So there's a contradiction there. If they're supposed to protect and serve, why are they only coming in as an intervention when a kid is supposedly doing something wrong? There's a problem right there with that message. And so how do we get past this and really do things that lives up to what the police are supposed to be, and that is to protect and serve. And if you're going to protect and serve, usually if we have a sense of belonging, if they feel like they're a part of this community, maybe they will protect and serve. But if you're just coming from your own community to come here to make, one culture feel comfortable, then the other culture, there's going to be a problem. And I think it's just set up, and that's why we're having the problems we're having. From my perspective.
Doctor, I've got about a minute before I go to a break. Give me one big takeaway for you when you're talking about young Black men interacting with the police.
We need more empathy, more understanding. There is a deleterious deficiency of meaningful empathy. Why is this? Because there are narratives about why Black men struggle that need to be confronted, because these narratives are not accurate. They represent intellectual dishonesty. The majority of Black men have families who they want to take care of. They want to be seen as men. It's very important to understand the mind of a man. A man wants to provide. A man wants to protect. A godly man wants to be the priest of his home. A man wants to be a leader. If you're speaking to another individual who's a man and he wants to be these things, it is very difficult to stay calm because of your identity as a man, as a leader. You want to speak up for yourself because you are responsible for speaking up for your family. So you have to speak up for yourself. But then also, I think about the mental health. A lot of times, men, starting with young boys, they get diagnosed with things like conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. They actually have anxiety disorder or major depression disorder.
Doctor, I need you to hold that point because I've got to take a break, but I don't want you to forget that point. And I also want to remind our listeners and our viewers that you can hear this and every WHUR Daily Drum discussion via podcast on WHUR.com. It's posted before 9 p.m. every night. Please stay with us. This special edition of the Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM, channel 141, and all of our social media platforms. The original Quiet Storm on WHUR is next, but this conversation continues on our platforms and Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141 and all of our social media platforms. Tonight, you are listening to and watching a special edition of the Daily Drum. The title of this program is Young, Gifted, and Frisked. It is an examination of what appears to be a resurgence of police stop and frisk policies across the nation, in addition to, at times, deadly confrontations with police officers between Black men. My guests are Dr. Robert Wingfield, Michelle Coleman, Juwala Lloyd, and Aize Zabater. Of course, Dr. Wingfield and Michelle Coleman are from Boys Town here in Washington, D.C. Before the break, we were talking to Dr. Wingfield about some thoughts about the issues concerning how Black men and police officers interact and how those things unfortunately break down. You were talking about some of the things that happen to young men as they are stigmatized as they are growing up. Please finish it.
Yes. So narratives start at a young age. Okay. So there is a reason why there's overrepresentation in schools for many, many years. Thankfully, some of the numbers have changed, but for many, many years, the Black boys, the first graders, the second graders, the third graders, they were clumped into emotionally disturbed wings of schools, which affects your self-identity. You think you're bad. Nobody told them that they were simply depressed. Nobody told them that they had anxiety disorder. Anxiety and depression, especially in pediatric level, looks like anger in many ways. It looks like non-compliance because the individuals are displaying symptoms that lead to these displays of behavior. Now, why is this relevant? Because then that third grader is going to become a 10th grader, an 11th grader, and 12th grader. And if they think they're bad, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now you have an attitude because you think this is what you're supposed to have because everybody told you all your life that you're a bad person. You're not a bad person. Don't believe it. There needs to be more equitable assessment practices so that the anxiety and the depression can be diagnosed in the Black boys and the Black girls fairly, evenly, just like it occurs in the white population. And then you become a man, and what happens? People say that you're angry. People say that you're aggressive. Most of the time, when we see the police videos, what we are observing in the reaction of Black men and Black women too, panic disorders, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder. Ray Sharp Brooks, as soon as they put the cuffs on his hands, tactile sensation reaction to the metal of the handcuffs, and he shifted drastically, inexplicably. That is a symptom often of a stress response. Why did they treat him the way that he did? He was polite. He did everything correctly. All I'm saying is that police officers should, like the young man already said, have comprehensive, robust training so they understand the mental health elements too. How can you hold a gun to somebody's head and say, stay calm, just get on your knees, put your hands behind your back, stay calm? What are you talking about? There's a gun to this person's head. How can he stay calm?
Ms. Coleman, I'm going to piggyback on that. There's a video that has been circulating on social media and in the news media. Clayton County, Georgia, happened about 2 weeks or so ago. A white female police officer holding a gun on 5 young boys, none of them of legal age, teenagers. And it's just what Dr. Wingfield was talking about. What impact do you believe that videos like that, seeing what happened to Rayshard Brooks, what happened to George Floyd, is having on the greater community. It has to be traumatic. You even spoke about, bringing police officers into the community and having these discussions. But the way things are going right now, I'm sure for some children, just to see a police officer come into a room may be traumatic.
Absolutely. So, and that's why I said we've got to figure out how to get back to that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so just that visual alone, young people, a number of young men, and you have a police officer with a gun. They have no weapon. They're no threat, but you have a gun at them. It's extremely traumatic. It's traumatic for them to be in that situation. It's traumatic for anyone that looks like them, that see that happening. And so often we know, I mean, I have a 9-year-old son, and even with the whole Rayshard Brooks situation, he was asking me, well, what part didn't the police understand if he was drunk, or what part didn't they understand if he was asleep? So even at 9 years old, you can see that one person, is powerless and the other person has that power. And so this does do something to the psyche, as Dr. Bob is saying. And so I think, one of the things that I would offer in what we do in terms of family meeting topics, we absolutely have to talk to our kids just about their African American history. It didn't start with slavery. They come from kings and queens. And so when we talk about, their self-confidence and building them up, it starts early. We do have to start having these hard conversations at younger ages right now. And it has to be consistent. They need to know where they come from. They know that racism exists, whether you want to talk to them about it or not. They're going to see these videos, and they're going to see in the protests. They're going to hear it. And so I think, adults need to be in the room with them, having these conversations, not hiding it from them, but also really kind of going through it with them and help them put some of it in perspective. I think the other side of the work has to be done with the police force. It has to be done with, even if it's non-police, we're talking about some racist things that are happening here. And we've got to teach that empathy. We've got to teach that compassion. But they also need to understand mental health disorders. They need to understand some that already have it, and it's hard for them to cope when they're in a situation like this. But then how this could trigger trauma in those kids' life. And so now a kid who may have, been growing up productively, this traumatic event can have a significant impact on them for the rest of their life.
Talk to me, Ayize, if you can. In the beginning of the program, you said that you had, good and bad interaction with police. Have you been negatively impacted by your difficult interaction with police? I mean, are you now second guessing yourself when you are, walking the streets of Baltimore, when you're in school, when you're walking the streets of DC, as to how you are to interact with the police?
Well, I would say, one, I'm definitely blessed for the parents that I've had, and for my parents, because I feel like they have instilled with me they have done a lot of what she was just speaking to about, teaching me about my history, teaching me about how to react and respond to things. So I feel like for me, I have been able to kind of self-manage some of the stress that may come with interacting with police. And I feel like because of that, it has definitely helped me to, I guess, not fear the situations, because, but just be cautious, because, things can go wrong and things can happen. But, just being aware of and cognizant of that. But also I make sure to just, take it case by case, because, I've had, like I said, there was one time an officer stopped me, and he just asked me where I was going. He noticed I was driving a little weird. I had just got off work. I was sleepy on my way home, and he's like, "All right, man, just be just be all right, get home safe. And like that was a positive interaction. So it's always good when that happens. And but like I would be lying if I didn't say that, it didn't go through my mind that something negative could happen. But I just try to I do my best to try and minimize as many things that could go wrong in the situation as possible. So,
Well, same kind of question, for you, because essentially, based on what you were sharing with us, not only did you get arrested, but you were locked up for 2 days for walking down the street. I mean, you're walking down the street.
Just making my way downtown. But nah, seriously though, like it's not even fear, because false evidence appearing real is just a book. I'm afraid of God. I do not fear anything. And that's what we have to instill in our black men. The trauma of walking down the street is just, I know he gonna mess with me because he jealous. So isn't you can't be good or bad. You bad, they still mess with you. You good, they still mess with you. Is no such thing as fear. I don't fear no man walking in no uniform. You're scared too. You're fearing of me because of what I look like.
But do you have any concern at all?
Concern is the higher power.
Okay.
That's what the concern is. The concern is the music. The music is very tainted, and they pick and choose what they want us to listen to. That's why we have to be smart. And as rappers, as entertainers, like myself, we have to put a message out there from things that we're absorbing from HUR at home, and then projecting it in our own life to wake us up as human beings. We don't have to be afraid of some man who has some deadly weapon in his hand. If you know what you know, you can disarm him without being armed. And that's what we have to do to teach our people without being angry, but also knowing when to defend yourself and how to defend yourself. And just because it's a police officer, I don't mean that you can't defend yourself. Yes, I know that is laws that say you cannot put your hands on an officer, but I think you can resist if you don't have any cause. If you don't have, if there's no, I forget the words or the statements or the sayings that need to be done. But we don't need to focus on words. We need to act, and not just with protest, but with money. We need to protest with music. We need to protest with not using certain things. The fear is a lie, and it makes me mad. I'm sorry that I'm projecting that out, but fear is not real. We have to get rid of that concept. We have to tap into our higher power, whatever your higher power is. You need to tap into that, harness that energy, and use it for the oppressors, not your fellow brother.
And I think, speaking spiritually and having the spiritual and faith-based confidence is important. But just like just like anything else, often in all faiths, we are given common sense and a way to behave so that we can get home alive. And certainly, fear, concern, these are natural things. And so, Dr. Winfield, as a clinician, but also as a young Black man, what do you say to people like Jawalo, who may have the spiritual courage to deal with these confrontations, but also must deal with the realities of what we see on the streets every day?
I just want to say, excellent question. I just want to say these young brothers demonstrate why it is so important to engage younger individuals in the conversation. These guys are brilliant. These guys have a lot of knowledge. They have a lot of perspective. They even have wisdom. And so the conversations that happen on Capitol Hill, the conversations that happen in those boardroom meetings and those policy making meetings should include folks like the ones on this call, the young men in these calls, on this call. And common sense, Harold, I love how you said common sense, because the common sense is I want to get home tonight. Like I want to be able to, raise my kids. I want to be able to experience a long lasting marriage with my wife. That won't happen if we are on the side of the road dead, right? So this is not checkers. This is certainly chess. Okay. We may lose the battle, but not the war. And I think you gotta You got to kind of leave the house understanding whether you're going to be in it for the battle or for the war. And the war is the bigger concept. The war is the bigger fight. We need all the black men and women to survive in order to continue the journey of advocacy together. So the discipline that Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King exhibited is the kind of role model we can lean on at a time like this. His "I Have a Dream" speech was extremely inspirational, but it continued to be influenced by the civil disobedience and the peaceful protest approach. And so, before leaving the house, we should check our stress levels because it's difficult to remain disciplined if you're already overwhelmed and already worked up. I think of stress as a fluid that starts at the feet and goes to the forehead. If you think of it that way, the head is 10, the level 10, and the feet are level 0. If you feel as if your stress levels as a black person before leaving the house is above a 5, you don't need to leave the house yet. Because if you get pulled over, you might not execute the common sense that Harold just described. You need to do meditations, you need to do reflections, you may need to pray, you need to do things to get you into the present moment, because the battle of mental health is usually a struggle with what happened yesterday or concern about what might happen tomorrow or what might happen in 5 minutes. Being present means I am able to make decisions that are supportive of my values. And I think for everybody, surviving is important and live to fight another day.
Something you said something that just struck me, and I remember many, many years ago when I was taking driver's ed, and my driver's education teacher said to me, "Do not drive angry, because if you're driving angry, then you're not paying attention. You're not looking in your rearview mirrors. You don't have all of your wits about you, and it could cause an accident." But the point that you just made, when you're talking about checking your stress level, anxiety when leaving the house, and staying, on the subject of just driving. Yeah, you could cause an accident, but the reality is if you're angry and you hit that accelerator and there's a cop there, don't worry about the accident. Worry about the police officer who's going to pull you over, and you're already upset at what at your wife said to you, or your girlfriend, or what have you, on that phone call or leaving the house. And so you are already opening yourself up to a confrontation that could go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly, metaphorically speaking. But I want to drill down a little bit more, if I can, Ms. Coleman, about the kind of instruction when you're talking to the youngest children in your program. You've spoken about what you say to them, but what are they saying to you? The microphone, please.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. That's a great question. So I think it varies. It varies because we have kids. It's just like this conversation here where we have one, saying that it's not right. And so sometimes our kids come to us and, and they're real matter of fact, right versus wrong. And, I have a right to walk down this street. I have a right to do these things. I didn't do anything wrong. And so, they have a lot of questions, and they will even question what we're saying to them. And sometimes they may even misinterpret and think when we're telling them, well, don't talk back at that moment. They think that we're telling them that it's something about them and that the police are right. And so, it does take constant conversations. One of the other things that we do to help with that conversation is make sure that we provide rationales, right? We want to make sure that we provide reasons that resonate with them and that's relevant to them at their age level. And that's why I say, even like what Dr. Roberts is saying, we want you home alive. We're not saying they are right. And so we try to teach them how to remain calm and how to, center themselves and what can they do for themselves in that moment, because it is wrong. It is going to be painful. It is going to upset you, but we want to make sure that you are prepared for that. So they just most of their questions, quite frankly, is why, and it's a lot of but why, and but I didn't do anything wrong, but that's not right. Our kids really want to see things in life as fair. What's fair and what's unfair. And unfortunately, that's not how life is. And so it is our goal and our role to make sure that we prepare them for that life, once they leave our doors, and how to interact in situations where it seems unfair.
What,
And then, go ahead.
no, what did you tell your son? You mentioned that you were talking to your son about the Rayshard Brooks incident, and he was asking these barrage of questions.
Yes.
He's 9 years old. So what did you tell him?
First, I just kind of was very honest with him in the questions that, I don't even have all the answers. He said, what part of it the police don't understand, that he was asleep? And I said, baby, sometimes they're not thinking about that other person. I don't know what was going through that police officer's mind. I don't know what part they did not understand. And then, from there, we've had multiple conversations. I began to look for different movies for us to watch so I can help him understand the different perspectives. One of it could be just about race, that was just a Black man that was laying there. And he was, this police officer at the time, was invoking his sense of, a level of authority. And so this is what I want you to know and to understand, that as you're growing up, you might be innocent and they can be wrong, but this is what you need to be able to do. Unfortunately, I really did not have all of the answers for him, but what I make sure that I do now is that, knowing that he's seeing these things, that I take time out to sit down with him and catch that news clip, and that we process it together. But what I had to help him understand, that man wasn't doing anything wrong. I think with Dr. Rob's point, when I think about a child, I think about the fact that he's sitting there, and we all know that in a lot of situations, they could not give him a ticket. They didn't catch him driving drunk. And so why didn't was he asked, can someone come and pick you up? Do you have a ride home? And so if you're in that situation and you know that that's an option and you're not given that option, we are immediately going to go to, okay, this is not going to end well. Then that panic sets in, and then, we may react, and then things go completely left. And so, I try to say to my son that adults right now, as a young kid, adults are not always right. Police officers are not always right. It doesn't make it, but here's what mommy need to make sure you need to understand, and what you need to do to make sure that you can get out of that situation. And then we can talk later about what could have been done differently.
You say you have been participating in the Black Lives Matter protest in DC, and coronavirus craziness notwithstanding, with Morgan and many in all colleges across the country shutting down. But you do come from that intellectual HBCU infusion. Why are you going to the protests? Talk to me about what you're feeling when you're down there. What is the message as a young Black man for you when you are participating?
Well, for me, the reasons why I'm going down there is to be active in in the community, and really try to connect with people, because I feel like because all these things are going on, everybody now has an opportunity to get their voice out there. But I also feel like not only getting my voice out there, but really trying to connect with other people, learn about what they're doing, and seeing how we can hopefully build and start to do some things, actually do some things as well as also voice our frustrations. So for me, I have a friend, and she's been very active. She's been rallying. She's been organizing a few protests, and so I've been able to help out a little bit, support her in some of the stuff that she's been organizing. So for me, the message is just trying to connect with as many people as we can, so that we can not only have these conversations, but then take the next step to actually build something to actually, help put other people in place, and better their situations and better their lives, so that way, we're moving forward as a community.
Juwalo, the same question for you. As you look at the protests and you think about your interaction with police and where we are in the nation as young, Black men, maybe not so young, but and what the message is kind of moving forward when we're looking at the interaction between police and Black men.
Moving forward, we have to come together as people so we can move as people. We be getting the word human being misconstrued. Is a human and is a being. What we need to do is combine the two so we can be one. We're just red and blue right now. How can we get to purple? Is what we need to focus on. Meditate, read, and if you don't want to read, watch certain things on Netflix. Stay away from TV. That's how I protest. Stop buying certain stuff. Because I'm a security guard, I have to be on post. So I can still protest and not buy your stuff and not watch what you want me to watch. And also think outside of the box so we can make that circle, if that makes sense to you.
It does. It does. It really, it really does make sense. Thinking outside of the box and looking at the continuum of human life and how we can think more clearly and more holistically. I have only a few minutes left. I'll let you have a last word, Ms. Coleman, and then you, Dr. Wingfield. Last word from you, Ms. Coleman.
I think, just reflecting on that last question, just even what do I say to my son, that's a tough question. So I think we need to, and as for parents out there, we don't have all of the answers, but I think we need to understand that we have to have conversations. We can no longer just exist. I think when we don't talk about these things, that's worse. So, I would say we need to have conversations with our kids. There's no certain age. Figure out how to have it at 5, but have the conversation. We need to talk about racism because it exists. They know that they see different color of kids in classrooms. We need to talk about violence. We need to talk about justice. We need to continue to have the talk on how to prepare our young men on how to interact with police, how to make it home alive. But then we also need to teach them how to then advocate for themselves, how to rally together and have peaceful protests. We need to make sure that as soon as they're of age that they need to vote. And that's where we need to start empowering our young people to have a voice, how to raise your voices through vote and through appropriate action.
Let me
get
Dr. Wingfield in real quick. Dr. Wingfield, I'll give you about 40 seconds. Your final thoughts.
My final thoughts is collectively, the country, every citizen in it needs to become better versions of Good Samaritan as a nation. The Good Samaritan represents an anti-racism stance, not just a non-racist, an anti-racist. The Good Samaritan helps those who are in distress. Right now, the Black community is in distress.
I think that's a good place to end. Well said. I want to thank all of you for participating in this program as it relates to young, gifted, and frisked. The examination of what appears to be a resurgence of police stop and frisk policies across the nation, and sometimes unfortunate, deadly interaction with police. Dr. Robert Wingfield, Michelle Coleman, Juwalo Lloyd, and Aize Sabater. Again, we really appreciate your time so very, very much. And I want to thank all of our listeners and those watching on social media. And remember, you will be able to hear this podcast and see this program on all of our social media platforms. That is The Daily Drum. for this Thursday, June 25th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.